Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're really digging into a fascinating report you shared with us. It's all about the global market for implantable medical devices, looking specifically at 2025.
That's right. It gives us a great snapshot, not just numbers, but the dynamics, current size, where it's heading.
Exactly. So our mission today is to sort of pull out the key insights, make sense of these trends, and figure out what it all means.
Let's do it. It's a really dynamic field.
Okay, so let's kick off with a big number just to set the stage. For 2025, the projection for this global market is, well, it's huge.
Yeah.
USD 92,514.5 million.
$92.5 billion. Yeah, that's massive. It really shows how vital these devices have become, doesn't it? Pacemakers, orthopedic stuff, just fundamental.
Absolutely, but it's not just about where it is now, it's the growth, right?
Right. That's maybe even more telling. It's not standing still.
Definitely not. By 2033, the forecast jumps to USD 153,111.1 million.
Wow, over 153 billion.
Yeah, which works out to a compound annual growth rate, a CAGR, of 6.5% between 2025 and 2033. That's pretty solid, sustained growth.
It is. And a big piece of that puzzle, the main driver really, seems to be the rise in chronic illnesses globally.
That makes sense. You think about things like heart disease, diabetes, arthritis. They're just more common, especially with aging populations.
Exactly. And as those conditions become more prevalent, the demand for implantable solutions, things that can help manage or treat them, just naturally goes up.
It's a direct link, isn't it? Global health trends driving market growth. Okay, let's talk geography. North America seems to be leading the pack currently.
It is. For 2025, North America is set to hold over 37% of the market. That translates to about $34.2 billion.
$34 billion. Why so dominant there? Established healthcare systems.
Yeah, that's a big part of it. Plus, a history of early tech adoption and innovation in the region.
But while North America's big now, the report flags another region for really fast growth, doesn't it?
It does. And that's the Asia-Pacific region, APAC. The projected CAGR there is 9.2%.
9.2%. That's quite a bit higher than North America's projection, which is around 5%, I think.
That's right, 5.0% for North America. So yeah, 9.2% in APAC signifies a real acceleration. There's a serious momentum building there.
What's behind that boom in Asia Pacific?
Well, it's a few things coming together. You've got massive populations, and they're aging, particularly in places like China and India. So the basic need is growing.
Okay.
Then you add rising healthcare spending. Governments are investing more. Economies are developing, so more people can actually afford these kinds of treatments.
Right. Access improves.
Exactly. And they're adopting new technologies quickly. Plus, there's a push for local manufacturing, which helps with cost and innovation within the region itself.
So for anyone listening, APAC is clearly a key area to watch for future developments and market shifts. Okay, and within the devices themselves. One type is growing particularly fast.
Yes, cardiovascular implants. The report singles those out as the fastest growing segment in the whole industry.
Which, given what we said about chronic conditions like heart disease, probably isn't a huge surprise.
Not really, no. It lines up with the broader health trends.
Okay, let's dive a bit deeper into these regions then. Starting back with North America, largest market in 2025, that $34.2 billion figure. What's the outlook beyond that?
So growth is steady, but like we said, more moderate, that 5.0% CAGR overall.
Mm-hmm.
The U.S. is the giant within the region, obviously, about $27 billion in 2025.
Yeah.
And its growth is projected around 4.8%, again, driven largely by the aging population and those chronic conditions we keep mentioning. It's a mature market, but still growing.
And Canada and Mexico, how do they fit in?
Canada is actually expected to grow a bit faster, 5.8% CAGR, starting from about $4.1 billion in 2025, maybe driven by tech advancements and, well, rising healthcare costs pushing for newer solutions. In Mexico, around $3.1 billion in 2025 is looking at a 5.5% CAGR, so still healthy growth across the board.
So the takeaway for North America seems to be still the leader, steady growth, driven by familiar factors like aging, chronic disease, and the demand for less invasive options.
Pretty much. Those are the core drivers you see everywhere, but they're very pronounced in North America's established system. Okay, shall we move across the pond to Europe?
Yes, let's do that. Second largest market share, right? Over 29% in 2025. That's about USD 26.8 billion.
Correct. Around 26.8 billion. And the growth projection for Europe overall is 5.6% CAGR through 2033.
And within Europe, any standouts?
Germany is the biggest single market there, roughly 5.3 billion in 2025 and growing at about 5.8%. The UK is next, around 4.5 billion, but with slightly faster growth projected at 6.4%.
6.4% for the UK. Interesting. Any reasons cited for that?
The report actually mentions favorable reimbursement policies in the UK as a contributing factor.
Oh, okay. That makes sense. And Russia.
Russia's significant too, over 4.1 billion in 2025, though the growth is forecast a bit lower, around 4.6%.
And there's a whole list of other European countries with solid numbers, too, it seems.
Absolutely. France, Italy, Spain, all in the 2 billion plus range for 2025, with CAGRs between, say, 4.7 and 5.0%. Even smaller, wealthy countries like Sweden, Denmark, Switzerland, Luxembourg show good growth, generally in the 5 to 6% range.
So it looks like fairly consistent, stable growth across Western and Northern Europe, especially. What are the underlying drivers there? Similar to North America?
Largely, yes. The growing elderly population is key, plus the rise in chronic conditions. The report specifically mentions things like brain aneurysms alongside cardiovascular diseases.
Yeah.
We also have very sophisticated healthcare systems and a strong trend towards minimally invasive procedures.
So established systems, aging populations, and tech adoption seem to be the story in Europe.
Okay, let's pivot to the real growth engine, Asia Pacific. That 9.2% overall CAGR is definitely eye-catching. It really is. And remember, it's already a big market, over $22 billion in 2025, about 24% of the global total.
And China's the giant there.
By far. Over $9.3 billion projected for 2025 with a strong 8.7% CAGR. But India is the one with the highest rate of growth.
Oh, really? What's India's number?
India's projected at an 11.1% CAGR, starting from a base of about 2.2 billion in 2025. That's really significant growth potential.
11%. Wow. Okay, so China and India are major forces. What about other key players in APAC?
Well, Japan is still a large market, over 3 billion in 2025, growing at 7.7%. South Korea is also strong, about 2.7 billion, growing at 8.3%.
Okay.
And then you have Australia, Singapore, Taiwan, all showing robust growth rates, 8.5%, 9.0% respectively. Even Southeast Asia as a collective block is projected at 10% growth. It's just widespread dynamism.
It really paints a picture of a region transforming its healthcare landscape. Let's quickly recap the drivers there because it seems like a potent mix.
It is. You've got the chronic illnesses and aging, like elsewhere. But layered on top is that rapid increase in healthcare spending, both public and private. There's strong government support, improving affordability, faster adoption of new tech, and that growing local manufacturing base. It's all firing together.
A perfect storm for growth, in a way. Okay, moving on to South America. Smaller share, but still interesting growth, right?
Yeah, over 4% of the global market in 2025, about $3.5 billion, and the projected CAGR is 7.2%, so faster growth than North America or Europe.
And Brazil leads there.
Brazil's the largest, around 1.5 billion in 2025, with a 7.8% projected CAGR. But Argentina actually has the highest projected growth rate in the region.
What's Argentina's rate?
8.1%, starting from a smaller base, around 590 million in 2025, but still, that's very strong growth.
Definitely. And other countries like Colombia, Peru, Chile.
Also showing solid growth. CAGRs in the 7.0 to 7.5% range. So yeah, good momentum across the key markets there.
What's fueling that growth in South America? Is it similar factors again?
Somewhat. Rising healthcare costs actually play a role, pushing for more effective long-term solutions maybe. Increased public awareness is mentioned. Higher rates of chronic conditions like diabetes and cardiovascular disease are definitely a factor.
And infrastructure.
Yeah, improvements in healthcare infrastructure are key, plus the adoption of new tech downs. The report even mentions things like 3D printing for custom implants. And, importantly, a growing middle class means more people can access these advanced treatments.
Right. Affordability and access are crucial. Okay, next up, the Middle East.
The Middle East represents about 4% of the market in 2025, roughly $3.7 billion, and is projected to grow at a pretty healthy 7.8% CAGR.
That's strong growth rate. Who are the leaders there?
Saudi Arabia is the biggest market, about $1.3 billion in 2025, and also boasts the highest growth forecast at 8.1%. The UAE isn't far behind in growth rate, actually slightly higher at 8.3% from a base of around 760 million. Turkey's growth is also strong, projected at 8.4%.
So really robust growth in those key Gulf states and Turkey. What about others like Qatar, Egypt?
Also growing well. Qatar at 7.3%, Egypt at 7.6%. It seems fairly consistent across the region.
And the drivers? I imagine chronic diseases are a factor there too.
Absolutely. Diabetes, heart disease, cancer. There's significant health challenges in the region. Combine that with aging populations, rising healthcare spending, tech advancements. It's a familiar story in some ways.
But anything unique?
The report does emphasize the strong focus in the Middle East on actively upgrading healthcare infrastructure. That investment really helps pave the way for adopting these more advanced implantable devices.
Makes sense. Investment breeds adoption. Okay, last ridge in Africa, smaller market share currently.
Yes, the smallest regional share, around 2.2% in 2025. That's just over $2 billion. The projected CAGR is 6.8% up to 2033.
6.8%, so still growing respectably. Which countries are highlighted?
South Africa is the main market, about $716 million in 2025, and it has the highest projected growth in Africa at 7.7%. Nigeria is mentioned too, smaller base, around $163 million, but growing at 7.0%. The rest of Africa collectively makes up the largest chunk, growing at around 6.0%.
And the drivers in Africa, similar themes again.
Pretty much. Increasing chronic illnesses, aging populations, rising healthcare spends, though often from a lower base. A key point here is the necessity to improve healthcare infrastructure in many emerging economies across the continent. Plus, growing health awareness is also pushing demand.
Okay, so it seems those core drivers, chronic disease, aging, tech, are global, but the rate of growth really depends on regional factors like economic development, infrastructure maturity, and specific healthcare initiatives.
Exactly. It's a nuanced picture.
Right. Let's shift gears now to the types of products and procedures. The report breaks this down too. What's dominant on the product side?
Orthopedic implants are flagged as likely dominating the market. Think hip replacements, knee replacements, spinal implants.
Why orthopedics? Just the sheer number of joint issues.
Yeah, largely. The rising incidence of osteoarthritis, fractures, spinal problems, especially as people get older. Plus, the technology keeps improving, better materials, less invasive ways to do the surgery that helps drive growth too.
Okay, so orthopedics leads in size, but we already know which one is growing fastest.
Cardiovascular implants, yeah. Driven by all those heart conditions we talked about.
Yeah.
But also, importantly, by technology. Better biomaterials, stuff the body accepts more easily, more sophisticated sensors built into devices, integration with digital health platforms. It's making these implants much more effective and appealing.
Technology really pushing the boundaries there. Any other significant product types mentioned?
Yes, several others. Reconstructive joint replacement, which overlaps with orthopedics, spinal implants specifically. Dental implants are a big area. Intraocular lenses, mostly for cataracts. And breast implants are also listed as a significant segment.
So a really wide range of applications, from bones to hearts to eyes and teeth. Okay, what about the procedures themselves? Does that mirror the product trends?
Pretty closely, yes. Orthopedic procedures hold the largest market share, which makes sense given the dominance of orthopedic implants. Same drivers apply.
And the fastest growing procedures?
Cardiovascular procedures. Again, aligning perfectly with the growth in cardiovascular implants. More heart conditions needing intervention. Plus, advancements in techniques like catheter-based procedures are fueling that expansion.
Okay, that alignment makes perfect sense. Now, the report also summarized some overarching market drivers, restraints, and trends. We've hit on some already, but let's recap. Key drivers.
Number one, definitely the growing prevalence of chronic illnesses. We've talked that one through. Number two is technological development, especially coming out of developed countries making devices better, safer, smaller. And third, the increasing use of advanced biomaterials for better compatibility and outcomes.
Those seem like powerful forces pushing the market forward. What are things holding it back? Restraints?
Two main ones highlighted. First, the high cost of these devices. That's a big barrier, particularly in regions with less developed economies or insurance systems.
Yeah, accessibility is key.
Definitely. The second restraint mentioned is insufficient knowledge or instruction about these devices. That could be on the patient side, maybe even sometimes among healthcare professionals, potentially hindering adoption or correct usage.
So cost and education are hurdles. What about major trends shaping the future?
A big one is the growing interest in less invasive procedures. Patients want faster recovery, fewer complications, and the technology is increasingly enabling that.
Makes sense. Anything else?
Government programs and resources supporting the industry are also seen as a positive trend. That kind of backing can really help accelerate R&D and market access.
So minimally invasive focus and government support are trends to watch. Okay, let's briefly touch on who the big players are. It sounds like a competitive market.
Oh, very competitive. You've got the big global names and also strong regional players. The report mentions companies like Medtronic, Abbott, Johnson & Johnson, Boston Scientific.
The usual suspects in medtech, yeah.
Exactly. Smith & Nephew, Stryker big in orthopedics, Cochlear for hearing implants, Integra Life Sciences, Livanova, Biotronic. It's a list of major corporations.
And how do they stay on top? What's their edge?
Usually, it's a combination of things. Very broad product portfolios covering lots of different needs, extensive global distribution networks to get those products out there, and, crucially, a huge focus on R&D and constant innovation. They invest heavily to stay ahead.
And the report even gave a couple of recent examples of that innovation, right?
Yeah, it did. It mentioned FDA approval in August 2024 for an Abbott Laboratories dissolvable drug-eluting stent. That's a big deal. A stent that does its job supporting an artery and then gradually dissolves away.
Oh, interesting. So it doesn't stay in the body permanently.
Potentially, yeah. That could avoid some long-term issues associated with permanent stents. The other example was a strategic partnership announced in July 2024 between Boston Scientific and a biotech firm,
What was that focused on?
developing orthopedic implants with better bioactive coatings, basically coatings that help the implant integrate better with the bone and speed up healing.
So real cutting-edge stuff happening constantly. Okay, we've covered a lot of ground. Let's try to boil it down. What are the main takeaways for our listeners?
I think, number one, this is a huge market, and it's growing significantly. Number two, the growth is fundamentally driven by aging populations and the rise of chronic diseases worldwide.
Right, a growing need.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Number three, while North America is the biggest market now, the fastest growth by far is happening in the Asia-Pacific region. That's where a lot of future potential lies.
Okay.
And number four, within the product types, keep an eye on cardiovascular implants. They're leading the growth charge, driven by both need and technological advancements. Orthopedics remains dominant in overall size, though.
Excellent summary. It really is a fascinating intersection of global health needs and technological innovation.
It absolutely is.
Mm.
Which brings us to maybe a final thought, something for you, the listener, to mull over.
Go for it.
Given everything we've discussed, the trends, the drivers, how do you think future breakthroughs, maybe in areas like material science or even personalized medicine, could further revolutionize implantable devices? Could these advancements start to tackle some of the current challenges, like that high-cost barrier, and open up even more possibilities for improving people's health down the line?
That's a great question. How does something like AI or advanced materials change the game even more? Definitely something to think about. It's clear this field isn't going to stand still.